Hello, everyone. I'm Elon Musk, and I'd like to share with you some of the fascinating moments I've witnessed in Washington. These experiences have shaped my perspective on policy and the future we're building together, and I'm excited to take you through them. I am standing in this vast, overlit conference hall where Samsung's semiconductor executives are trying to maintain the disciplined calm of surgeons, yet Trump is barging straight through the center aisle like he is wading into a rally crowd, waving his hands theatrically and demanding someone explain why his chips are not being celebrated loudly enough, even though he has already mispronounced semiconductor 3 times in under a minute. I watch him assert ownership over technology he clearly does not understand, as the executives force polite smiles that look more like muscle spasms while they walk him through the Taylor facility's production of Tesla's AI5 and AI6 chips, a process he claims he personally inspired, even though he cannot distinguish memory from compute. The lead engineer tries to outline the contract worth 23 trillion won, but Trump interrupts to deliver a monologue about how American innovation thrives whenever he enters a building, which causes one executive to blink so slowly it looks like he is rebooting his sanity. Then Trump leans toward an engineer and asks if these chips are the ones that make the internet faster, and the engineer's soul briefly evacuates the premises before he quietly clarifies that they are manufacturing high-performance computing silicon, not Wi-Fi extenders. Trump nods in that confident, vacant way he does when understanding is nowhere in the vicinity, and he pivots instantly to accusing TSMC of raising second process prices specifically to inconvenience him despite having no involvement in the transaction. He paces the room like a malfunctioning metronome, rambling about how Samsung's customers are shifting from TSMC because of his leadership aura, while the executives exchange glances that say they would rather endure a cleanroom contamination incident than another minute of the circus. His swagger inflates as he declares himself the secret catalyst behind Samsung's strategic planning, insisting their memory division is profitable because they intuitively follow his instinctive style, whatever that phrase is supposed to mean. Then he stops abruptly, eyes gleaming with misplaced revelation, and demands someone bring him one of those Exynos brain chips so he can feel how heavy genius is. And the silence that pulls over the room is so heavy it might register on seismic instruments. Before anyone can respond, he resumes ranting about chip inflation like a man who has just discovered economics 5 minutes ago, claiming that Samsung's ability to offset margin pressure in consumer divisions is unfair to America, though even he seems unsure what point he is making. Yet he keeps circling, praising himself for inspiring a semiconductor revolution he has never contributed to, touching a display model clearly labeled "Do Not Touch," and preparing to escalate his theatrics as the staff collectively brace for whatever absurdity he is about to unleash next. Trump is pressing his palm flat against the forbidden display unit as if he is communing with a relic of divine power, and the Samsung staff are inching toward him with the tentative caution of people approaching a volatile creature that might either settle down or detonate without warning. He announces with booming authority that he can feel the pulse of American innovation vibrating through the device even though it is not plugged in, and I watch an engineer beside him blink at a speed that suggests internal distress. Trump insists that Samsung's foundry success stems from the competitive spirit he personally radiates simply by existing, and the executives manage polite nods while their eyes scream for help. He resumes pacing, complaining loudly about TSMC's rising second process prices, claiming it is part of a coordinated effort to drive up iPhone costs because Apple respects him more than people think, a statement that causes a vice president behind him to stare vacantly into the distance as if reevaluating his entire career. Trump rattles on about controlling semiconductor inflation by just telling companies not to charge more, displaying a breathtaking confidence in ideas that dissolve under basic scrutiny, yet he delivers each sentence with the swagger of a man unveiling fundamental economic truth. Then he turns abruptly to a researcher and demands to know whether Samsung's adoption of Exynos is a patriotic decision or a business one, leaving the poor researcher frozen in a crisis he never anticipated facing today. Trump, oblivious, congratulates himself for inspiring what he calls national synergy, a phrase so nebulous it evaporates on contact with logic. The executives attempt to nod without visibly dying inside, as he compares chip architecture to building a luxury hotel out of Legos, a metaphor that lands with the elegance of a dropped cinder block. He shifts again, declaring that the American semiconductor surge is a direct result of his past economic shockwaves, ignoring that his industrial strategy historically resembled weather patterns more than policy. When he boasts that Samsung is attracting crypto mining customers because he restored global confidence, an analyst looks away quickly as though maintaining eye contact might shatter the last remnants of her composure. Trump rolls forward, unprovoked, into an inflated sermon about risk management, misrepresenting long-term supply contracts as if he invented the concept, and he demands confirmation from a terrified junior analyst who produces a strangled sound that Trump interprets as enthusiastic agreement. He launches into a rambling critique of volatility, explaining the memory market in the tone of a man describing a bowling tournament, and the actual economists in the room exchange the blank, haunted look of people wondering whether reality is starting to fray. Trump seems invigorated by their silence, interpreting it as awe rather than horror, and he strides toward the next display with the confidence of someone who believes the world is improved every time he opens his mouth, preparing to escalate the chaos with yet another revelation that will undoubtedly collide violently with both logic and physics. Trump is striding toward the glass wall overlooking the clean room with the self-importance of a man preparing to address a silent army, and he taps the reinforced pane with his knuckle as if he is checking the ripeness of a melon, announcing that he can sense tremendous productivity happening inside, even though the engineers cannot hear him, and if they could, would almost certainly request hazard pay. The operations manager beside him winces with the tight, brittle pain of a man reconsidering every decision that has led him to witness this, and I watch Trump puff out his chest confidently as he claims the workers are moving faster because of his presence, interpreting the steady rhythm of professional engineers as personal tribute. He gestures toward them with the sweeping confidence of someone unveiling a miracle, while the executives behind him tighten their jaws in synchronized agony. He pivots sharply into commentary on Google's TPU, insisting it is obviously inspired by something he suggested years ago, though he never specifies what that something is, and the R&D director's eyelids droop in a silent plea for the universe to intervene. Trump continues, weaving an incoherent tapestry of theories about Javier 3's performance, as if he alone cracked its optimization strategy. Even though he cannot pronounce half the terminology he tosses around like confetti, he jumps suddenly to Amazon's Trainium chips, calling them beautiful but totally overrated, and then shifts again to explain that OpenAI should really be using his preferred architecture, which remains undefined beyond the claim that the smartest people get it instantly. The room sinks into deeper bewilderment as Trump declares that NVIDIA GPUs are too dramatic, and somehow this spirals into him taking credit for reducing national energy consumption by inspiring more efficient thinking, a concept so gravitationally unhinged, it bends the atmosphere around him. But the breaking point arrives when he claims Samsung's historical memory volatility is actually great for business because people love drama, and the head of the memory division stares at him with an expression so blank it could be a monument to disbelief. Trump mistakes the stunned silence for admiration and turns triumphantly toward the financial analysts, demanding they confirm that Samsung's long-term supply contracts are basically his idea, and one poor analyst emits a noise that resembles the dying cough of a trapped animal, which Trump enthusiastically interprets as validation. He then begins explaining market cycles with the depth of a horoscope, saying prices rise when the market feels confident and fall when the market gets tired, and the economist beside him briefly closes his eyes, perhaps contemplating life beyond consciousness. Trump walks in widening circles, mocking past inventory collapses and insisting he would have prevented them by telling companies to chill, stating it with the absolute confidence of a man who has never encountered data. The mismatch between his certainty and his comprehension is so stark it feels like an atmospheric hazard, and as he raises his voice to deliver what he clearly believes is a unifying theory of the semiconductor universe, the room braces in collective dread, waiting for the next wave of confusion he is about to unleash. Without hesitation, Trump is lifting his hand like a prophet who has just received a revelation, and the whole room stiffens because everyone knows that whenever he pauses for dramatic effect, the next statement will almost certainly defy logic, gravity, or both. He proclaims that Samsung's entire foundry strategy is basically following his business instincts as if he alone has shepherded them through every wafer cycle, and he begins pacing with theatrical authority while explaining that investing only after securing customer orders is exactly how he built his empire. A declaration that prompts the finance chief beside him to mentally revisit every bankruptcy Trump has ever left in his wake. Trump thrusts his arms outward and insists he could personally stabilize DRAM price volatility through something he calls market discipline, a phrase so weightless it evaporates instantly, and the economist's nearby exchanged looks of exhausted resignation as he continues painting himself as a guardian spirit of global pricing. He then pivots sharply toward the glass substrate exhibit, announcing that the Samsung Sumitomo joint venture exists only because he ignited innovation through tough love, though no one can identify which country he thinks he was pressuring at the time. The manager from Samsung Electromechanics swallows hard, clearly fighting the urge to correct him, while Trump jabs a finger at the substrate samples, like he is presenting evidence in a trial he is conducting against reality itself. He claims that American grit is the true driver of next-generation material breakthroughs, even though none of the engineers who developed the process have ever interacted with him, and he pushes forward, criticizing domestic competitors for being too emotional, a spectacular accusation from a man whose reactions resemble a weather system fueled entirely by self-inflicted melodrama. Before the room can recover, he swerves into CMP slurry, mispronounces half the supplier names, and confidently confuses wet etching with something he calls water polishing, causing a process engineer behind me to stare at the floor with the blank despair of a man contemplating a different career entirely. Trump misinterprets the pained silence as validation and, now swaggering with renewed energy, announces that Google's TPU breakthroughs are clear evidence of his pressure on big tech, even though no one in the room believes he could articulate the difference between flopes and voltage droop. He continues to praise Javier 3.0 as proof of what he calls his leadership ripple effect, while several executives quietly confirm through eye contact that this phrase means nothing. Then he begins lecturing AI hardware engineers about designing chips that are less picky, because perfection slows people down, and the horror that flickers across the engineers' faces is instant and visceral, as if someone has suggested replacing clean rooms with garden sheds. Despite their silent anguish, Trump takes the absence of praise as further admiration, and he turns his attention to the investors, assuring them that long-term contracts are stable because he has inspired discipline across markets, an assertion so unmoored from any known dataset that the strategist beside me inhales sharply. Trump lifts his chin like a victorious conqueror, unaware that the room is balancing on the thin edge between disbelief and collapse as he prepares to escalate into yet another monologue that will stretch the limits of coherence. Trump is drifting back toward the center of the room like a storm system returning to a coastline it has already pummeled, and he clasps his hands behind his back with the regal affectation of a visiting emperor surveying a kingdom he believes he personally constructed, even though he still cannot describe a transistor without spiraling into a parable about loyalty. He begins proclaiming that Samsung's future success in the American market will depend on embracing his brand of decisive leadership, which he defines as moving fast, trusting instincts, and not letting experts get in the way of greatness, a creed that would unravel a foundry in minutes, yet he delivers it with the gravity of a man unveiling universal law. He insists the entire semiconductor boom is a delayed reaction to his fearless economic precedent, while a strategist beside me massages his brow with the numbed resignation of someone longing to disappear into an alternate timeline. Trump pivots abruptly into an unsolicited lecture on investment strategy, equating large-cap memory stocks to skyscrapers because the tallest ones always win, a metaphor so catastrophically imprecise that one analyst glances upward as if contemplating an early exit through the ceiling. He moves on to chastising mid-cap companies for pretending to be giants, describing them as actors without a stage, and the executives absorb this with a strained quiet that suggests they are conserving emotional oxygen. Before anyone can recover, he points at a chart of projected semiconductor cycles and claims he understands them better than the people who built the model, explaining volatility with the profundity of a fortune cookie by saying the market rises when it feels strong and falls when it gets tired, leaving the lead economist in a momentary trance of existential despair. Trump, energized by their silence, begins outlining his fantasy plan for stabilizing memory pricing by rewarding companies that behave, offering the kind of simplistic authoritarian solution that signals a complete misunderstanding of how global supply chains function. He then reassures the room that their future will remain bright as long as they keep listening to him, and the sentence lands with the force of a faulty air vent belching hot air, prompting several executives to straighten their posture out of sheer survival instinct. He wanders back toward the clean room glass, tapping it again with a pompous flourish and claiming he can sense yield improvement because he is here. A statement so disconnected from reality that even the lighting seems to dim in disbelief. The engineers inside persist in their steady, disciplined coordination, oblivious to the spectacle on the other side of the barrier, while Trump lifts his arms as if conducting an orchestra that refuses to acknowledge him. The room is silent in a way that feels architectural, carved into the structure itself, as he stands basking in imaginary applause. He inhales deeply, preparing to issue one final pronouncement with the confidence of a man unveiling destiny, unaware that the only thing he has successfully reshaped today is the collective understanding of how far delusion can travel when left entirely unchecked, and the atmosphere hangs suspended in dread as he opens his mouth once more.